I'm the guy who said on the day that bin Laden was killed that it wasn't bin Laden. And we now know it wasn't bin Laden. It was a patsy provided by the Pakistanis. I'm the guy that called 9/11. I'm the guy that has called every false flag event and so forth. I'm also the guy that as soon as this Russian hoax thing came out, I and Bill Binney simultaneously came out and said it wasn't the Russians. Okay, and now Bill Binney is going around. He's involved in several legal trials around the country. He has demonstrated technically and definitively that it was an internal download to a flash drive that was then handed over to someone who then gave it to Julian Assange. The technical proof on this is definitive. Okay, so essentially the FBI and the Department of Justice in the Obama administration committed treason. They basically committed high crimes and misdemeanors. They stalked candidate Trump. They made up lies. And then they got people like Mike Flynn and Roger Stone. Mike Flynn did nothing wrong in talking to the Russian ambassador. What he did wrong was not declare a $500,000 payment from Turkey to be an agent of a foreign power, and he did not, and then he lied about the meeting with the Russian, okay? But he did nothing inherently wrong. So Mueller, for me, is the poster child for malfeasance in U.S. law enforcement. And let me also point out that Mueller is indictable for 3,000 counts of obstructing justice and 3,000 counts of complicity to murder after the fact, because his primary job as director of the FBI after 9/11 was to cover up 9/11. So Mueller is a very bad boy, and I think his time has come. He appeared almost senile during these hearings. I think Mueller is done with. He's toast.
Yeah,
so is the Democratic case against the president.
Yeah, I mean, when you heard him testify, it seemed like he didn't even write the report. It seemed like he didn't know what was going on. And I believe, like you just said, I believe this was their last straw to try to maneuver some type of obstruction case to try to get impeachment. And I don't think it worked. I think they hit a dead end, and there's no place for them to go.
They have much bigger problems than impeachment. I mean, I almost no, I will never feel sorry for Nancy Pelosi. However, the four morons that she's dealing with, known as the Squad,
yes,
are an abomination. And let me point out, I'm privileged to be friends with Black leaders like Cynthia McKinney and Dr. Randy Short and a couple of Black Panthers and others. And you want to talk about racist. There is no one more racist than a Somali in Minnesota or Michigan who thinks that American Black people are lower than whale shit at the bottom of the ocean. Okay? These people are offensive. They're racist. They're not representative of America. And I believe they're all one-term congresswomen.
Yes. And also there's information coming out about Representative Omar marrying her brother, tax fraud. What'd you say?
She didn't sleep with him, or so she says.
Right. And it's funny because she won't release the names of her family or anything like that. And I think Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch has filed an ethics complaint against her, and I believe there will be an investigation into her. And these individuals, these four that are out in front of the Democratic Party, I do believe that they're all going to be exposed for who they are.
Let me also say,
okay,
Dave, as an old CIA spy, I didn't really understand the CIA until after I left it. And I started reading. I've read over 300 books, nonfiction books, on the world of intelligence and counterintelligence. And I never really understood Manchurian candidates and mind control and false identities and putting up politicians like Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a waitress actress who auditioned for the job of congresswoman, and she's being puppet mastered by her Indian chief of staff, who stole Bernie Sanders' email list and then used that to raise money, and then he stole money from her, okay, according to the various media accounts. So what we have here is it's gotten to the point where someone like Barack Obama can be elected despite the fact that he might be a bisexual who's done tricks and all these other things that they're just covered up by the media. If you want to come to a current story today, the Epstein story, the media is systematically avoiding, and I called this in 2008. I said Epstein was a fake billionaire. He was a Mossad operation. He was an upgrade to the Ghislaine Maxwell prostitution ring that included children. Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who got a state funeral for being the most famous Mossad agent in history. Okay? So the media today is not covering the fact that Epstein was funded by Les Wexner, who's bisexual, and who may have funded 9/11. It's not covering the fact that CIA and that it's a Mossad operation. It's not covering the fact that CIA and the FBI were complicit from day one and have been sharing the take. And finally, the media is absolutely not covering the fact that Epstein is just one of 50 Mossad pedophilia entrapment operations across the United States of America. There are 49 others, all of them protected by the FBI. And one final point. These 27 states that passed a law making it a felony to call for a boycott in Israel, do you think they passed that because it was a good idea? Or do you think they passed that because all of them are being bribed and half of them are being blackmailed by the Mossad for pedophilia? We're getting to the core here.
Yeah, I mean, with Epstein, he's just the front man, right?
He's the front man. And let me tell you, we have something in the intelligence business called sheep dipping. And what that means is, like in the case of Edward Snowden, who I'm still convinced was a CIA operation against NSA. The State Department is stupid, but they're not so stupid as to cancel his passport so that he has to stay in Russia. Okay? What they did with Snowden, who was a security guard and a high school graduate at NSA, and he got his job because he had decent parents who had security clearances. He was a high school graduate security guard at NSA. They took him into CIA. They ran him overseas and sheep dipped him as a CIA technician. Then they brought him back, and Booz Allen placed him in Hawaii, despite his lack of qualifications. And then he was handed the so-called treasure trove that hundreds of other people had spent over a year putting together, and then the Edward Snowden thing was launched. Okay? So Epstein was basically a penniless moron who couldn't graduate from college, and they placed him in a school, and then they sheep dipped him at Bear Stearns, and then Les Wexner, who appears to have had an affair with him, then funded him as a fake billionaire, and that was the launch. Now, Epstein wasn't smart enough to actually run a prostitution ring. That's all Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay? Ghislaine Maxwell, as best I can tell from secondary sources, was running a prostitution ring for the Mossad in New York City. It included children, but they needed a boy to normalize pedophilia and to suck in the boys, I use the term advisedly, and bring people in and kind of basically take it up to the presidential level. And so Jeffrey Epstein was managed by Ghislaine Maxwell. And that's another aspect of the story that the media doesn't want to cover. Okay? Epstein is a fake in so many different ways, but nobody wants to touch. I mean, you look at Bloomberg, I'm reading everything every day. Bloomberg, New York Times, New York Post, Forbes, Atlantic, they are all either run by pedophiles or scared to death of being killed for running with the story.
And what's very interesting is when this came out, they changed everything. They changed Wikipedia. They changed the pictures, like they removed the pictures with Clinton. They replaced it with Trump.
Union. I mean, we're erasing everything.
Yeah, I mean, everything completely changed, and nobody's going down the path that, you know, Epstein was friends with Clinton. Clinton flew on the Lolita Express. Ghislaine Maxwell was
No, I mean, he flew on the Lolita Express, and coincidentally, every time he flew, there were a cadre of very little girls on the same airplane. Look, the bottom line here is that the entire mass media, including CNN and Fox is particularly derelict because Fox should be all over this story. The entire mass media is either terrified or compromised. And this is a story that has to be told, and I'll tell you why. For too many years, America has been run by a foreign power named Israel. And I am careful always to distinguish between Zionism and Judaism, two completely different things. What we have here is an opportunity for the president to do 9/11 disclosure, plus Epstein disclosure, and essentially get us to an honest Congress that makes evidence-based decisions, which is why Cynthia McKinney and I were pushing #unrigged. And they came after us, the Zionists, not the Jews. The Zionists came after us 6 ways in 90 days. And I tell that story at tinyurl.com/Google Gestapo. That's when I realized how controlled everything was. So Donald Trump, by the way, is also the only guy who threw Jeffrey Epstein out of his club when he hit on a member's kid. And Donald Trump is the only guy who has been said publicly by prosecutors and police to have not just collaborated, but collaborated openly when we did the first round with Jeffrey Epstein in 2008. Now there's a Zionist attempt to besmirch the name of the First Lady. There are people going around saying that she was one of Epstein's honey traps for Donald Trump. I've looked into this very carefully, and all indications are that she was a very shy person who did not party. Trump was actually her first big date. She was brought in through an Italian, through Milan and Paris, not through the Israeli modeling agency that Epstein and Maxwell used. As best I can tell, the First Lady and the President are completely clean on this whole Epstein thing, despite the fact that people are trying to drag him in order to push down on the stuff. One final point. I believe that Epstein's faked suicide this morning, or yesterday, last night, was a prequel to his being declared dead and smuggled to Israel, where he will live happily ever after surrounded by little girls, procured by the Israeli government. Epstein should not be in prison. He certainly should not be in prison with a former policeman who killed a bunch of people and buried them in his backyard. He should be in a CIA prison inside of a U.S. military base that is made up as a safe house, and he should be being debriefed. We already have all of Epstein's videos. We already know who he has been blackmailing. What we do not know is what they did for him. Jeffrey Epstein is very valuable for the after story.
So when you say blackmail and we have these videos, where did the videos come from?
Well, we have a tinyurl.com/Mossad-Epstein, where M and E are capitalized. So love tinyurl. Want to buy it one of these days. tinyurl.com/Mossad-Epstein. And in there you will see a picture we snagged from Twitter of the videos, 16 channels, of the caverns on Lolita Island.
Okay.
Every guest room on Lolita Island, and also on the other island where he may have a submarine pen, and every video in the cavern where children were seen huddling, okay, in groups, and you can see that picture. That's all in hand. Every hotel, he had 2 no-name hotels, one of them in the Trump Tower, according to secondary sources. And these so-called no-name hotels are very luxurious hotels that you don't know they exist unless you're invited by name. Okay, these no-name hotels in Washington D.C. and New York were also wired for video. I think we've got all of that, and NSA also has every phone call and every email ever made between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and anybody they ever talked to. So we have the map. What we don't have completely is all the tacit knowledge, the deals that were cut face to face and what was done. And one of the things people don't understand is that the Mossad doesn't just blackmail people for political influence and for money for Israel. They also blackmail corporate chiefs and others to gain special access to the computers so that they can plant backdoors. This is how Robert Maxwell made his name, with a software program called Promise that installed backdoors in all these government computers. They use these computer backdoors to get advanced knowledge to do insider trading. The greatest practitioner and enemy of the United States in the industrial espionage arena is not China or Russia or France or Germany. It's Israel and Great Britain.
So when you say that they are using these videotapes to blackmail people, are you talking about politicians? Are you talking about Hollywood actors or actresses? Are you talking about wealthy businessmen or women?
All of the above. Let me say that I think this started out focused on members of Congress and the senior executive service and cabinet office. But it has over the past number of years, Franklin scandal, by the way, people forget this is all over the country. I cannot emphasize more that there are 50 of these cells. Epstein is just the big one that's in the news. There are 50 of these. They've got a cell in Hollywood. They've got a cell in Kansas. They've got a cell in Illinois. Okay. And these are all entrapment things. So politicians who control money, judges who control the law. There was just a thing that came out today that Roy Kahn, who was a very famous Russian U.S. Zionist fixer in New York City, he was a mentor to Donald Trump. He used to say, I don't care what the law is, tell me who the judge is. Judges in this country are controlled. We just had a case with Jim Fetzer in which a judge made a summary judgment despite the fact that the facts were in dispute, and it should have gone to a jury trial. That's now gone to an appeals court, and I'm hoping that Sidney Powell will get engaged, and the appeals court will do a de novo ruling, and I think that judge should be sanctioned for abuse of discretionary power. The judge was not supposed, this was a Sandy Hook case. Sandy Hook, by the way, and this case is a microcosm of what Sidney Powell has written about in her book, which, by the way, is one of my absolute favorite books. Okay? This is the U.S. government licensed to lie. So this Mossad operation was going after politicians, judges. It was also going after society influencers, celebrities, people like Oprah Winfrey, people like Sarah Sarandon, people like Barbara Streisand, and others. And I'm not naming them as people who are pedophiles, but that's the kind of target person that they would be very happy to capture. People like Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, and so forth. They've also gone after anchors. Anderson Cooper is someone I would want investigated. This is a really serious, broad thing, and I want to emphasize it's not just at the national level. It's at the state and local level. It includes sheriffs on the border towns. It includes prosecutors who decide whether or not to prosecute all these Israeli art students that have been going around trying to intimidate drug enforcement agency people. So it's huge. We have never in the United States done counterintelligence seriously. And let me just end by saying the FBI was founded by a pedophile named J. Edgar Hoover, who used to take small boys as gifts from the mafia. And it was J. Edgar Hoover who invented the art of using government resources to blackmail politicians. All right, so we've got, I mean, you talk about draining the swamp. This isn't about draining the swamp. This is about moving to another planet. It's bad.
Do you think it's coincidental that this came out now? Because right now we have Barr investigating spying. We have the FISA. We have the D-class. And then all of a sudden, Epstein popped up. Do you think this is all connected where they're going to...
Yes, it is. Look, I go back and forth on whether Donald Trump is a tool of the Zionists or not. But I'm coming to the conclusion that the guy is a genius, that he knows exactly what he's doing, and that he's got some sort of set of patriots behind him that are out of this world. And let me tell you what really did it for me with Trump, even though, I mean, I voted for him as much against Hillary Clinton as I did for him. But what really did it for me, because you know I'm a commissioner and chief counsel for the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child Sex Abuse. I'm also the guy who has been sponsoring the book Pedophilia and Empire, Satan, Sodomy, and the Deep State by West Point graduate Joaquin Hagopian. And that book is free online, tinyurl.com/pedo empire, one word. What really showed me Donald Trump's genius was one of his earliest executive orders on human trafficking. That executive order was the light into the tunnel. And what you're seeing now, he had to wait for Mueller to be disgraced. He had to wait for the Mueller thing to play out and die. And it died in Congress yesterday. All right? Mueller's a dead man walking in so many different ways. Now I think what I'm hearing is that September, October, November, and December are going to be very big months. For example, David Wilcock, the author of, this is a great book, this is a 6-star book that I'm reading and I'm about to review. David Wilcock has said that insiders have told him that the president is planning a full disclosure on extraterrestrials, unidentified flying objects, and this is the important part, free energy in September. The president also has some economic initiatives coming out this week and next week. And I'm hoping that it includes going to a gold standard or an asset-based dollar. It includes controlling the Federal Reserve. It includes making the private banks responsible for the debt that they've amassed. Every single dollar is not a U.S. government debt. It is a private bank debt, because the Federal Reserve is a front for the private banks. They have basically been issuing debt notes, okay? We also have evidence that they stole $43 trillion. I believe the president has recovered $15 trillion. I believe in the next 2 weeks, you're going to see $1.5 trillion pumped into the U.S. economy, bottom up, by over 5,000 agents who have 2 marching orders: hire people and buy new, don't rent. And if the president does free energy, and if he then adopts my open source everything engineering concept with the open source agency, his infrastructure plan and his localization and distributing plan, notice that he just moved a part of the government to Colorado. More parts of the government are going to be distributed across the country. What you will see is a revitalization of America at 20% the cost of the failed Western economic model, which is 50% waste and 90% profit for the banks. So I underestimate this president at your peril. I think he is going to roll out, he's got 14 months before Election Day. He is going to roll out 52 major initiatives, probably including student debt relief and possibly including an end to the income tax, the federal income tax. He also needs to educate America on the Electoral College. The Electoral College exists because we are the 50 United States of America, not the United Popular Mob of America. And any governor and legislature that opts to have the state's electoral votes go to the popular vote should be run out of office on a rail. And by the way, the reason that the citizenship question matters and has to be on the census is because Obama took it out in order to give California 4 more House seats and New York and Florida a couple more, okay? The census, if it doesn't distinguish between U.S. citizens and counts every voting age person, then it's counting all the illegal aliens and it's counting all the foreigners, okay? So you have to put the citizenship question in order to allocate the congressional districts according to who's a citizen, not according to all of the illegal aliens in California. So I think the president knows what he's doing. I think he's got a mediocre staff. I think he's really hampered by having people like Bolton and Pompeo make an ass of himself. He should never have said that the Iranians are lying when they say that they captured all these Iranian traitors. I know for a fact, no. I know as a former clandestine case officer that the Iranians are telling the truth. The Cubans did the same thing to us. They videotaped two of my classmates, Jay and Lane, because all 22 of our Cuban agents had passed the polygraph, but they were double agents. So the Cubans did videos of Jay and Lane doing dead drops and having clandestine meetings and the whole bit. Now that the president has gone on record and said the Iranians are lying, you can expect the Iranians to start playing publicly videotapes of agent meetings with CIA officers in Dubai and elsewhere.
So if Trump came out and said they're lying and they didn't capture the CIA agents, who did they I mean, did they actually capture the CIA agents?
Yes, absolutely, without question. Phil Giraldi, who's Ron Paul's former national security guy, is also a former clandestine case officer. He said exactly the same thing. The Iranians have been waiting to spring a trap. They have arrested 17 Iranian traitors, and they have very cleverly not taken down any CIA officers. Okay? The Iranians have figured out how to neutralize the American intelligence machine and how to neutralize the American military machine without pissing off the American public. Do you remember the USS Donald Cook?
Yes.
This was a ship that was completely neutralized in the water by an unarmed aircraft flying over it. Okay? That's what we can do to aircraft carriers now with Russian and Iranian electromagnetic capabilities. In Venezuela, CIA was handed its ass because they forgot what I learned when I served there many years ago. Cuban intelligence runs Venezuelan intelligence, and the Russians pay the bill. Every single person CIA had in Venezuela that they thought was a defector or somehow helping them bring down Maduro was actually being managed by Cuban intelligence. Okay, we've got a clown show here in Washington, clowns in action. And the president is being lied to by clowns in action. It's being lied to by Mike Pompeo, who sold his soul in order to get a pump to state. Mike Pompeo could not find the truth if it was chained to his neck.
Well, do you think that Trump has Bolton and Pompeo out there for a specific reason, like to control a different narrative that the mainstream media picks up while he does work on the back end?
Because I have to hope that's the case.
I mean, if we go back to Syria, I mean, he was out there, or North Korea, or any of them. You can see that, he was like, oh, we'll use North Korea as an example. Oh, look at the fat guy. He's going to, push the button. Our button's bigger. And he was talking war. Mainstream media was talking war. But behind the scenes, they were working out a peace deal, which I think in Iran.
Bear in mind that Korea was created by Xi Jinping in China.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
The unification and denuclearization of Korea is Xi Jinping. Donald Trump just came in as the closer. Peace with Iran is Vladimir Putin. And Trump is being given an opportunity to be the closer. Okay? Now, Trump is a pragmatist. And there are only 9 million Jewish voters in the United States of America. The power of Israel over our Congress and our state legislatures is not based on voters. It's based on lies, bribery, and blackmail. And I think Donald Trump gets that now. And the combination of Epstein, and we just had this idiot minister from Israel bragging in New York City that Israel owned 27 states and that it was planning to own the other states in the Union. Okay? I mean, how stupid do you have to be to say that in public in New York? And then 9/11 disclosure, which is a promise the president made on the 16th of February in 2016 in South Carolina. He promised 9/11 disclosure. Now, your viewers can find the 28 memorandums that the president and his intimates received at tinyurl.com/911-POTUS. It is now known that the Twin Towers were condemned in 1988. And Larry Silverstein and Dick Cheney were briefed, and they said, hallelujah. The towers continued to be owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey until July of the year in which they came down. The governors, the mayor of New York City, which is Rudy Giuliani, and the leadership of the Port Authority of New Jersey and New York are complicit in murder. 9/11 was insurance fraud disguised as terrorism to give us a twofer, to give a $12 billion payout on something that the EPA said could not be a controlled demolition because there was too much asbestos and too much other toxic stuff, and it was an excuse for war. I mean, Charles Lewis wrote a great book called 935 Lies. And so 9/11, when 9/11 disclosure comes out, it is going to make the American people so angry that I don't believe that any friend of Israel's is going to be electable in a future election.
And when do you think this disclosure will be brought out to the public?
That's a really good question, Dave. I mean, I want our president to succeed. I want him to be reelected. I think his plan was to hold off on disclosure and hold off on breaking with the state of Israel until he was reelected. I'm not sure he can delay. The Epstein thing has blown up in ways that no one anticipated. And I fear that you have a writ of mandamus coming out. The Lawyers Commission of Inquiry in New York City for 9/11 has done some absolutely superb legal work. And they've submitted, long ago, in April, I think, of last year, they submitted a 56-page or 56 attachment document to the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District saying, we demand a criminal grand jury. By law, the same attorney that is now prosecuting Epstein must convene a criminal grand jury for 9/11. And by the way, not one single claim on 9/11 ever made it to trial or to the legal process. This is important because I have a law case going against a Zionist that attacked me. And what I have learned is the federal court, once you get to the magic world of what's called discovery,
yes,
it's like a porcupine enema, okay? Your life is an open book. I can take your phone records, I can take your emails, I can take every single aspect of your life and shine a light on it. Not a single 9/11 victim got to the discovery process. Every single case was settled, and it was settled by a judge controlled by the Zionists. Okay? And again, I distinguish between Zionists and Jews, and I'm very proud of my Jewish colleagues now that are saying there can be no peace in Israel without justice for the Palestinians. And Marjorie Kahn has written an excellent piece saying that progressives without Palestine are hypocrites. You can't be a progressive without understanding that genocide and apartheid is wrong. Okay? Israel is an invented state. And Henry Kissinger said Israel would not exist by 2022. I think it might still exist by 2024, but I believe that the invented state of Israel is going to be uninvented. And what you will find fascinating is that the Chinese are now controlling the ports in Israel. The Chinese have also spent over $3 billion creating a Jewish autonomous zone in Manchuria, adjacent to the Russian Jewish autonomous oblast. And there are discussions going on with North Korea about creating a brand new port, the port of New Haifa, on land contributed by North Korea across from Vladivostok to create this massive new economic zone with China, Korea, China, and Russia. Okay. And I've published all of this. So my bottom line, I'm huge on truth and reconciliation. I'm also huge on justice. I think genocide is wrong. I had a chapter on genocide in my book, The New Craft of Intelligence. I believe that the days of getting away with lies, bribery, and blackmail are over. We still have not rationalized the American electoral system. Cynthia McKinney and I have 12 specific election reforms that people can see at unrigged.net. We still have not created an honest Congress. My goal for Congress in 2022 is 1/3 of the members of Congress are libertarians, Greens, or independents, or other small parties, so that 1/3 of Congress does not caucus with the two-party tyranny that is a front for the deep state.
I just want to go back to Iran for one sec.
Absolutely.
Do you think the same thing is happening in North Korea that's happening in Iran, where Putin is controlling Iran? Do you think Trump, and we discussed this before we went.
Putin is not controlling Iran. In fact, I talk to people like the French shadow foreign minister and others, and what's really emerging here is, number one, there's a Russian-Turkish axis. There's also a Russian United Kingdom axis that may surprise some people. Part of the problem with the U.S. State Department is it's run by Zionists and they don't care about the rest of the world. They're just focused on the Middle East and what they can do to wreak havoc in the Middle East. What you're about to see, I mean, remember that Russia is 80% Asian. And I want to give a shout out to my friend Parag Khanna, whose books, Connectivity and The Future is Asian, are two absolutely superb books that I've reviewed at phibetaiota.net. Russia, Turkey, China, and Iran have already decided the future of Central Asia. And the U.S. hasn't gotten the memos. Okay? Turkish is a principal language in 17 countries. U.S. hasn't gotten the memo. Okay? Egypt is about to emerge as a superpower together with Turkey and Iran. U.S. hasn't gotten the memo. Okay? So there's some really good stuff happening. And let me reemphasize, the reason I got nominated or recommended as public, nominated as secret. The reason I got recommended for the Nobel Peace Prize is because I have pioneered open source everything engineering, which allows you to lift the world, the 5 billion poor, at 10 to 20% of the cost of the failed Western model. Now, I stand on the shoulders of others, like Dr. Marcin Jakubowski, who, for example, has created a tractor that costs 10% of what a John Deere tractor costs. It's an open source tractor, no secret software, plug and play parts that the farmer can replace in the field. So you sell this open source tractor for 10% of the cost to 1 million more farmers who cannot afford a John Deere tractor. You've just changed the dynamics. Now, if you add to that the president's full disclosure with free energy gives you unlimited desalinated water. We just solved Yemen and Somalia overnight. Okay? So you cannot underestimate the president. As frustrated as I get with the morons that he surrounded himself with, I think he's on track. And outside of the president's sphere of control, there are people like me doing some very interesting things. I believe that the president will see the supreme leader in Tehran before Election Day, and there will be changes on the U.S. economy and world peace that are so vast in scope that people cannot even begin to imagine the positive energy that we're starting to move toward.
So you think there's going to be a peace deal, a new deal? I mean, Obama's deal has been scrapped. You think Trump is going to make a new deal with Iran?
Yes, and one of the things I've read a lot of books, and if people go to phibetaiota.net and they look up reviews, they'll see all the books I've reviewed on the White House, for example, including Chris Christie's book, Let Me Finish. I mean, Jared Kushner betrayed the president. by throwing away Chris Christie's 12 volumes of transition planning. The president would have accomplished twice as much by now if Chris Christie had been chief of staff and had actually been able to manage the transition. I'm very disappointed by what the son-in-law, the first son-in-law did. But one comment stands out from Cliff Sims' team of vipers. He quotes Jack Welch saying, "Our president is a genius, that I don't care what they say about him. That is the only president I've ever met that's able to talk business. It's like talking to a peer, not a politician." Now, for Neutron Jack to say that about Donald Trump, combined with the human trafficking order, combined with everything else I'm seeing about gold-backed dollar, the Federal Reserve under control, canceling the federal income tax, I don't think people can even begin to imagine the rabbits that the president is going to pull out of his golf bag in the next 2 years.
Do you think that they are getting ready for arrests? I mean, there's investigations going on.
That's a really good question. I've been frustrated, and the president has lost a portion of his base, particularly in Florida. There are a lot of people who are very angry that arrests have not happened. However, the recent decision to broadcast the trials from Guantanamo are a suggestion that we may be about to begin trials that will be of public interest, as opposed to fake terrorist trials, because most of the people in Guantanamo shouldn't be there. We should have let them go long ago. We have really abused process in ways that just make me sick to my stomach. I believe that most of the sealed indictments were never intended to be opened. They were there as a pressure point. Okay, it was basically a message to people across the United States of America. You need to understand, I have my eye on you. I can put a Ranger bayonet up your ass anytime I want. But if you let me take out the top 10%, we'll give the rest of you truth and reconciliation and a bye. I mean, this president is very smart, and I think he's advised by smart people. And the people he has in front that make him look stupid, you're right, Dave, they probably serve a purpose. And oh, by the way, John Bolton has a hair lip. That's why he has the big mustache. That's fake news. That's the only fake news I'm ever going to give you.
Do you think this will happen before the 2020 elections, these arrests? I mean, or is he going to wait until...
Yes.
I mean, I would think he would have to.
He has to arrest at least 10 or 20 people before 2020. In fact, your listeners at phi-beta-iota.net, which is PHI, not FI, phi-beta-iota.net, your listeners can search for Trump report card. There is a really good report card that's been done by a former Wall Street guy named Paul Adams. And basically, the president is running 1/3 green, 1/3 yellow, and 1/3 red. And that is in the face of enormous opposition from the deep state and the shadow government. And no, they're not the same thing. The deep state is the Vatican, the Chabad cult, and the descendants of Caesar and the British royal family and the Rothschilds. Okay, the shadow government, which Dick Cheney might still be in charge of, using the continuity of government program. The shadow government is the government that uses CIA as a base to basically leverage the rest of the government. For example, when the military gets a request from CIA for a plane on a national security charter, the Pentagon doesn't ask, how many small children are you transporting in that plane? Or how many bundles of cocaine are you bringing into the United States on that plane, which is what was passing through El Toro, which is what created the crack cocaine explosion in Los Angeles, okay? And again, there's over 7 CIAs. I think Gina Haspel is clueless about 2/3 of the bad shit that the CIA is doing. Nobody's telling her. And I like her, and I'd like to see her succeed. But the reality is, elements of CIA, the FBI, DEA, and others, DHS, are completely out of control. The president, this goes back to John F. Kennedy saying, "Get the missiles out of Turkey." And then Adlai Stevenson says to the president, "Mr. President, lest you think you control the U.S. government, the matter is still being discussed." Okay? So Donald Trump has a huge control problem. I don't think he has an imagination problem. I think he has imagined and understood and is acting on really, really big things. I'm discouraged only that he has not put forward #unrig election reform, because if he wants the libertarians and the independents, he's got to offer them a legitimate shot at Congress.
Yes, I do believe so. With the 2020 elections, do you think they're going to bring in voter ID?
It's a good question. One of the things that troubles me about the whole 2020 election thing is that the president doesn't have serious advisors on election reform. His election reform commission was put together by a moron who knew nothing about election reform, and it was laughed out of existence. Okay, he really needs to bring in Cynthia McKinney, myself, and a couple of other people, and he needs to understand that there are 12 separate things that need to happen, including instant runoff and paper ballots counted publicly on site. I mean, Diebold has bragged that it created the machines in order to execute fractional voting fraud. Any electronic machine can be programmed to designate the winner before the first vote is cast. Okay? So anybody using an electronic machine is by definition complicit in a crime or potential crime. Okay? So if I were the president, I would be introducing #unrig in 2 phases. Phase 1 would be designed to make sure that every independent and libertarian has a chance to get into the game, but not diminish the president's enormous advantage right now. I mean, the Democrats are a clown show, and the president has 3 times more money than all of the Democrats put together. So absent some major thing that we're not anticipating, such as the president dying, he's a shoo-in for re-election. But he needs to promise instant runoff and paper ballots and public funding of campaigns and media access. Every single broadcast network, every single newspaper is operating under a public media license. They should not be selling time. They should be allocating time in the public interest. Okay, so we've basically allowed the whole thing to become a crapshoot. The president was right when he said the system is rigged. And by the way, my trademark in progress for #unrig, I was inspired to think of #unrig when the president said the whole system is rigged. I am the original in April. Now, my term has been stolen, and I'll sue them later. But right now, #unrig was inspired by the president, and it is the only hashtag that is actually focused on putting the American people back in power and putting American people into office. Right now, you don't get into office unless the 2-party tyranny and a couple of billionaires have decided to put you in. Or in the case of AOC, the Justice Group, which stole Bernie Sanders' emails and stole money from the campaign, they decided to audition people and then put forward talking puppets. Okay, AOC is a talking puppet.
The last thing I wanted to touch upon is that Trump had this social media summit where he brought in all the alternative media and like Project Veritas. He brought in
all the fools that the White House morons thought were important.
These people, everyone was in the audience, and they were all talking about social media. And then we come to find out that there's an antitrust suit against Google and, well, actually social media, and a big RICO case against social media. Is he trying to reel in social media to make it fair for every single American? Because what they found is that
The short answer is no.
okay.
Let me say a couple things about the social media summit. First off, any summit that doesn't include Mike Adams is not serious. From Natural News. Part of the president's problem is that when Jared Kushner destroyed Chris Christie's work, it allowed the GOP to take off the Office of Presidential Personnel. And so President Trump, apart from the people that he's chosen personally, is surrounded by ringers who are there to advance a political agenda of someone else, not there to serve the president. And Chris Sims really captured this in Team of Vipers, which is a very good book. Most people in the White House are there to advance themselves and stab the president in the back. The social media summit was a piece of crap, okay? And they disinvited Ben Garrison, America's greatest cartoonist, because the Anti-Defamation League, Ben announced that he had been invited. The Anti-Defamation League, I speculate, rolled out this massive troll campaign. By the way, it's a federal felony to cyberstalk somebody, okay? They rolled out this massive campaign to get Ben Garrison disinvited, and somebody in the White House who absolutely had no balls or integrity at all disinvited Ben Garrison. Well, guess what? Ben Garrison's got a lawsuit. He is going to do discovery on the White House. He's going to get every phone call, every email, every postal mail, and every donor who called in saying, you've got to disinvite Ben Garrison. And then he is going to have the ADL by the balls, and I hope he gets a $20 million judgment. A $14 million judgment was just made against the Daily Stormer for doing exactly the same thing to a guy who was accused of being Jewish. And I certainly uphold that judgment because nobody, Jew or Christian, deserves to be cyberstalked to death. Okay? So this social media, I mean, basically the president doesn't know what he doesn't know, and Barr doesn't know what he doesn't know, and nobody in justice seems to give a shit about censorship. These people got the Communications Decency Act with the explicit intent of allowing all voices to be heard. And instead, the ADL is now the trusted flagger for all of the platforms, and the ADL is killing people, digitally assassinating them. Meetup is should be part of the RICO trust thing. The Meetup people, and the IPO should fail because Meetup is not worth an IPO, but Meetup, under the ADL's leadership, waived fees for 1,087 hashtag resist meetups, and it canceled my paid $77,000 hashtag unrig professional network that had a meetup in every single congressional district, and Cynthia McKinney and I were just starting to take off, going toward $50,000 a month in fundraising, and boom, the Zionists hit us 6 ways, okay? Hashtag tinyurl.com / Google Gestapo tells the 6 ways, okay? Which, by the way, Ben Garrison is familiar with, so he'll look at all 6 ways.